Malungil silsen morarugul ada kuknos bedet magal al tutaw tigil nga silbelaw mga rekribelaw. Kada umur tial program regidre al tutaw como besetil was ngaringing Irene ma Jennifer adibus ngaringa al sendir modas ilmei ing dingaringa imora atu gubets lokal maral mei selmenti mention mame nga ledu magote kami ngelo sel do mura programa ki moko over Raigel Ice on news Raigel Morgol Sunday yam clock to tler blur belau mesegi da ukmamde el moro uriur egida mongun galto gobetsel lokya. This morning, as you know, we're gonna do our program on this Friday program, and we have a special guest. And this guy, I don't need to introduce him because he can do his own. But briefly, it's BJ Cruz and I, we go back to many years ago. What, 30 years? 40 years? And I guess at that time we were known as radicals. We promote independence, indigenous rights, land rights of the natives. So, but I haven't seen him for a long time, and I was so surprised when I met him in his trip here, and knowing that he's a public auditor, elected public auditor. So this guy has been Speaker of the Guam Legislature, has been the Chief Justice of the court in Guam, and now he's public auditor. So it's a very unusual, I guess, accomplishment or feat for a lawyer, for a government official. So BJ, I'm going to add, welcome to you and to other public auditors that you have been meeting for a week to Palau, and it's I'm happy and honored to bring you here. You agreed to come, so I'm gonna give you time. Look at the, let's say, opening statement, or when we took Latin and Roman history, Roman Empire history. Caesar, his soldiers went to Gaul's area, Northern Europe, and they conquered the place. And when he went there, his speech, he said, "I came, I saw, I conquer." So you came to Palau, you saw. What did you conquer, or what did you do in Palau?
Well, no, it's been an excellent conference, and my hat's off, and Palau should be very proud of Nino and his office staff for the organization of the conference and the hospitality that we've been shown every night by different government officials and different government officers. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether or not you guys realize that you have a national treasure in Nino. I mean, he's the longest serving public auditor in the Pacific region.
So he's like your dean, he's the dean.
Yeah, he's the dean of the, and he's president. He's president, chairman of the conference, and he's chairman of PASI now. And we also belong to another organization, the PIPA, and he was chairman of that in 2018, and they hosted the PIPA conference here in Palau in 2018. But Nino is respected by all the other audit officers, and Palau would have been proud to watch Nino in action at the meeting this last couple of days, and his staff. He was right up there doing interventions, talking about things, and you would have been proud that he represented Palau very well.
So, as you know, he's the longest serving government official. Chief Justice Ngirmang was the second one. I think 27 years, and then he died. And then we have our ambassador in Washington D.C. who's like almost 30, but I think this guy 30 years. And
Yes,
it's quite an amazing.
He's an amazing man, and I really enjoyed watching him because he just takes leadership. Right? Like with the PIPA, he just decided we needed a constitution, and so he got a lawyer here in Palau to write the constitution for APIPA. And so the APIPA means Association of Pacific Island Public Auditors, APIPA. And so we're established here in Palau rather than any place else. And that's because his leadership was taking hold and moving forward. But the one thing that the conference was talking about, how we can gain independence, and the thing is that
independence from the executive branch and the legislative branch.
The way that the APIPA started was about 50 years ago. The Asian Development Bank realized that it was giving money out to all the Pacific Island and Asian nations. And it decided that what it needed to do was to make sure that the investments that they made in the islands was protected by having someone audit the expenditures to make sure that it was being spent as was promised in the loan agreements or in the grant agreements, whatever it was. So it started out as it used to be all in the Prime Minister's office and the President's offices. Then the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank thought maybe it should be a little more separated from the executive. And so they couldn't quite figure out whether or not it should be under the legislature or under the executive. And so it's sort of like a fourth little branch that sits out there, in government. And so most of the island nations have it in their constitution, and the Palau has it in their constitution, that the public auditor is appointed by the president, and he's confirmed by
one of the
House in Congress. And the only way that he can be removed within that 6-year period is that 2/3 of the House must remove him. So at least he's protected. And Nino has been reappointed continuously. He's now just acting for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not sure if...
Well, there's a requirement, has to be GPA. And in absence of qualified, like GPA degree, then the Chief Justice can appoint an acting one. And he's been reappointed every 6 years.
And I'm different from everybody else. I didn't realize it until we were having discussions at the meeting the other day, because PASI did a PMF to review all the offices and see how their independence was set up. And that from our old fights in the 80s, trying to get Guam still hasn't become independent, and so we don't have a constitution. And so I'm not established in the constitution. I was established by the legislature by statute, and Guam decided to have an elected person, and so that the auditor isn't beholden to the governor. He's not beholden to anybody. He's beholden to the people. And so in the discussions yesterday, that's interesting. Many of them hadn't thought about election, but some of them are like, ugh, so, how could you, what do you campaign on to win your public auditor?
Hey, BJ, before you go on, I forgot to ask you to tell us who you are. We Palauans, whenever you speak in public, the people will look at you and say, who's your father, who's your mother, what's your family background, what clan are you from, and what village? So I know Palauans, I think 50 years or younger do not know you. But those of us who graduate from Guam or live in Guam know you. So can you just kind of briefly tell us,
Oh,
your little bio or...
Moses, you should do that. No, I'm old. I've been around for a long time.
You're younger than me.
Yeah, well,
You're 72, I'm 73.
yes.
Yeah.
But been around a long time. I've been in government service now for 47 years. And so I initially served as governor's legal counsel. Then I became a legal counsel to the legislature. Then I was appointed to the bench. I was a judge for 13 years. Then I served my last 3 years on the bench in the Supreme Court, became Chief Justice, and then retired. I thought I was going to retire in 2001. But then people said, you're too young to be just sitting around, try to do something. So I ran for the legislature. I was in the legislature from 2005 until 2018.
Wow.
And the last 2 years I was speaker. And I announced my retirement in 2018 that I was not going to run for re-election because I figured I've done enough. But then Doris
Brooks.
she was the public auditor. She had announced her decision to resign her position as the public auditor and was going to run for Congress. I heard that one of the directors of the current the administration then was going to run for the office, and I thought, no way. I've got to protect the integrity of the public auditor's office and make sure that whoever's in that office is going to be able to stand up and audit and be able to speak out against.
And
any
being a
kind
former
of-
Chief Justice and former Speaker, you have some clout, some power.
Yeah,
or
so
influence.
so I ran, and not bragging, but I ran against 3 people, and I still won in the primary. I still had more than 51% of the vote, and so I was confirmed. So I resigned my seat as the speaker and took over this office. But
Personally, are you...
and I also have a Palau connection. The whole time that I was on the bench, I had a woman who took care of me. She was Palauan, and everybody on Guam called her Mrs. Cruz because she could sign my checks. She knew all my passwords to all of my accounts. Mariana Espangel.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was the last time that we saw each
saw
other
you
when
when
I
she
came
died,
down for
yeah.
Mariana's funeral. But
Tell me,
took me-
are you you're from a clan in Guam or a big family, a big Cruz family, that's why you get elected? or what?
No.
So you're not famous
not-
like Calvos
No.
and big families in Guam?
I'm not one of the blue bloods.
Okay. Well,
Just someone that crawled up from the bottom and
do you have
scratched my
any
way to the
brothers and
top.
sisters?
I have 2 sisters. One of my sisters is on Guam. She's also a lawyer, and she's the public guardian. And she takes care of people that need help. And so,
And by the way, what happened to your beautiful house on the cliffside overlooking? Remember in our when we were still radicals in the 70s and the 80s, we used to have party there.
yes.
You still have it?
No, actually, I had to. You remember how remote it was.
Yes.
And so when I became a judge, the marshals thought that was too secluded and remote for my security. And so they asked me to find some place closer to town and more secure for obvious reasons. But
So fast forward to now, and in your conference for 5 days, we have attended a lot of conferences in the Pacific, in U.S., in Asia, during our time. So conference were looked upon as just kind of a chance for politicians and leaders to go on vacation to overseas. And we went to Taiwan in 1982, and we had a lot of parties and all that, and you were the lawyer for the legislature. So, I interviewed Mr. David here last week, and he was telling about the conference, And my reaction from the vocal public, the old men of Palau, who discussed this with the retirees, and they kind of, somebody told me, said, it's all a waste of time, 5 days for what, given our, financial problems and new tax and this officials traveling on government, trip and driving government cars and, getting, big office expenses. What the public editor has done to control this, really, it's a rising corruption.
Well, I think one of the things that that has come out is that, at least from my point of view, is that if you want to fight corruption as a nation, you have to invest in the Office of Public Accountability, the Public Auditor's Office. I was able to use my previous connections at the legislature to make sure that I got a percentage of the budget, because otherwise the public auditor has to come to the legislature every year or the Congress and beg and
yes, that's a problem.
Yeah, and so that's almost untoward to be begging from people that you're auditing.
Yeah, and then the leaders who've been audited negatively, they're going to slash your budget or whatever.
And when we were watching what was happening in the United States when, during the Trump first impeachment, the Mueller report, the acting attorney general at that time said, well, there's a way to take care of Mueller and his group. Just starve it to death. Don't give it any money.
Yeah.
And so I thought, that really is a danger. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be a guaranteed amount that's given to the Office of Public Accountability.
And that's your case?
In my case, I got 0.25 of the total
budget.
Government revenue. Yeah.
Wow. But you don't want to tell the Palawan public that they have millions of dollars for your office.
Never mind.
Yeah.
But the thing is that in Palau, your office here, there's 8 people, 6 auditors and 2 administrators. In FSM, they have 20 in their national office.
Wow.
And then besides the national office, they have a point of pay office, which I think has 18.
Wow.
And then they have the various states. Each state has, Chuk and Kosrae, each have offices. And you really need to invest in the office here. As I was telling you before we came on the air, I met one of the young women who just graduated from the University of Guam with a master's degree. If she stayed on Guam, I would have hired her. But I'm so proud of the fact that she, like us, believed in and were nationalistic, and she came home and she wants to work here, and she feels a duty to work here. And so I'm very proud of the fact that she's here. But you have to be careful. You have to make sure that you invest enough money in the Office of the Public Auditor's Office, so that Mr. Tuwood can pay them appropriately, because otherwise they're going to go.
Yes, that's true.
One of the point of pay senior auditors moved to Guam. I tried to hire her, but it took so long for me to get through the system that the Department of Education beat me to her. Mm-hmm. But because auditors and accountants are in demand, and good ones are in even greater demand, and so you really need to invest in the office as a people. And I'm hoping, and the reason why I agreed to come to do this to talk with you is because I know that you have a lot of influence, and I met the senator, and so is to make sure that you guys invest in the office, because like the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, they underwrite PIPA and Pasay.
Okay.
And Department of Interior underwrites DOI because they know we're giving millions to these people, to these island nations. And in order to protect our investment that we're that we're putting out there, either in loans or in grants, in order to make sure that those funds are appropriately spent, we need to have those funds audited. And I looked at the website for the public auditor's office here in Palau. You must be getting a substantial grant from some Japanese government or some.
I really don't know, or maybe Taiwan government.
No, it's Japan, because it's Japan Heritage something or other.
Yes.
For the roads, for the buses, for the sewer
It's a
system.
grant, I think it's,
And for the last 3 years, Mr. Tewitt and his staff at the Public Auditor's Office here has been doing grant audits of just that. For the last 3 years, it seems. So there must be some condition of the grant that you guys that Palau has been receiving, that the public auditor has to provide an audit to make sure that those funds are being spent appropriately. And over the last 3 years, we've also been receiving tens of millions of dollars of COVID funds. And the office is going to need to do some audits of that, but they don't, they don't have that. They don't have the staff to do that, and so you're going to have. Palau is going to have to make an investment in that office.
And that's more of throughout the Pacific. That's a problem. Budget starved. These offices, except I guess Rich Guam has high-paid people, but.
Well, yeah, and they have the benefit of the fact that I've had my former position as a senator and speaker of the legislature. I was able to go over and, like just run into you and pat you on the back and say, "Hey, friend, I need you to come talk to the television. Talk on my show." I was able to go over and talk to them and explain to them, and they respect me enough to know that I'm not just asking it so that I can travel. I pay for my own travel, but out of my own funds. But the thing is that I want that office to be able to do audits, and I want to make sure that my staff gets appropriately paid. On Guam, like here in Palau, and in all the audit offices throughout the Pacific, we train them. We take them straight out of university. We train them, and the rules require, we all have to apply the rules from GAO, require that we have to have 80 hours of CPEs every 2 years. So we pay for it, and we train them, and we help them get certified, get other certifications. Then the public entities or the private sector says, "That's a really smart person there," and then they say,
They steal them.
And so you've got to invest in the office to make sure that the people stay, and that they're properly compensated.
So what did you address the problem of auditing public entities, the executive branch, and of course judicial branch and the legislative branch, and beside this organizations is government created, like our PPUC, our power company.
Yes, we have.
And then we have, so in terms of your meager resources, like in the case of Palau, there's so many public entities that receive public funds. And even we have 16 state governments that receive $500,000, from $500,000 to $1 million each. So, which entities we should audit first, especially in time of budget, because Palau government, they enact budget every year, and I have yet to see audit of the government budget for previous year in order to before they enact a new budget.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that kind of situation?
The problem is that audit firms, and I don't know if you know it, earlier last year, Deloitte announced that it was closing its office.
Yes.
And all the employees moved over to EY. The financial audits of the government are contracted out. Mr. Tewitt contracts out that audit, that financial audit to Deloitte. And that's substantial. You know, the amount of money that's spent on those audits is substantial. And so, but they've not been able to get Deloitte or EY to pay attention to it. And so I think the last audit that has been released for the government of Palau is 2020. Or I don't know if it's even been released. So 21 and 22 haven't been done. But you have to, again, that's investments. And I keep telling my senators, you know, you spend millions and millions of dollars, we spend millions and millions of dollars to have these audits done. Please stop and read them. There are very few people that read them.
Public audit report.
You know, as somebody spoke to us, an audit is like a parachute. It's only good if it's opened. And so, you know, I'm constantly, like a preacher, going over to my senators and saying, we spent a fortune on this audit. Please stop and take the time and read it and understand, because people have put their professional reputation and put out things in there that they want you to see, you know, to point out things. And like in Guam, we did a financial audit. We do the financial audit is done by Deloitte or EY. And when you look in the very small notes in the tiny print in the back of the financial audit, the notes are really interesting, because that's where all the dirt's hidden. all the interesting stuff is hidden. And I noticed a tiny little note that said that government exempt employees were getting overtime pay, and we think that there might be question costs of $1.7 million, as much as $1.7 million. But because Deloitte only did a very limited sample of 3 employees, the only question cost was only about $17,000 at the time. So I decided, that looked like a thing in the sweater that's a little frayed. So I pulled on it and pulled on it and pulled on it, and I'm going to be issuing an audit in the next couple of weeks that's going to expose the nakedness of of how the government funds were misspent. But you need to have the people to be able to do that. Yes. And in order to have the people, you need to invest in it.
The problem with that is that, you know, we have 16 state governments. And I was a governor of one of the states for 8 years. And also practicing law for 4 years, I have to deal with, when we have the dispute or problems or even criminal case suit against individual governors for abusing public funds. I look at the report, and this is something that I don't understand. They first submit the report to the party that you audit, and then they respond, explain. And I see they respond like they just kind of talk it away, and then when you see the final report come out, then you kind of look at it and scratch your head and say, what the heck is going on here? Because, as you said, I think few people read audit report, no?
Yeah, few. And again, it's going to be an investment in the government. My office contracts out 28 financial audits. We spend, for those financial audits, over $4 million. You know, because the government, the GovGuam-wide audit by itself is almost more than $500,000 a year because it's so big. Some of the autonomous agencies, DOE, GPA, GWA, their audits cost in the six figures to be done. And so, I mean, you know, but it's an investment. And then when Doris was the public auditor, she insisted that we were giving money to charter schools. And so while I was in the legislature, I ordered that the charter schools had to be audited too. But it all depends on how much you're willing to invest. Doris wanted to invest, you know, to have audits for everybody that got, any entity that got more than $750,000 from the government. But then we're going to have audits of in the 40s, 50s, 60s financial audits. But what we do, my office does, is the 28 big audits is done, and then we choose some of the other smaller agencies, and we'll look into the expenditures of those.
Well, I tell you what, the discussion of audit report and all this stuff is boring, you know. The discussion, because people, you know, they just cannot, you know, reading detail of how much money was spent and who spent what and all that, and then whether it's right or wrong. I mean, it's something that I think we need to, you know, as a government, as one who's been involved in the government in the last 40-some years, we really need to organize a system in such a way that this audit make mean anything, because many of audits just, you know, I said they put in the website, nobody reads them. Unless it's a legal case with a criminal or civil, then we can read about it as a writer. Then we write about it, so we have to go through it. But it's tough, you know, because...
yeah, and to Doris's benefit, and, you know, to Doris's credit, before I got to the office, she had a practice where she took the audit and she did a one-page highlight in hopefully understandable, you know, incomprehensible English. Or I noticed in Point of Pay, in FSM, they even translate, you know, they're thinking about doing the highlights in another language. So
what
you have to reach out.
What do you think of this appointed public auditor and elected like you? Because I think you're weird, you know. You're a fake auditor because you're the only one who get elected. And some, on one hand, people say, well, if he's elected, he's going to be beholden to the politicians or the party, whatever. So he cannot audit his party or his group, and he's going to audit a position. And then if you're appointed, then he will not interfere with get involved in the...
I mean, that was a question that was asked of me at the conference, was, you know, that I had been previously a judge, and I would... The thought of having to campaign and have my face on a sticker or on a button as a judge...
You have to campaign on a party platform? I mean, do you have to identify your party, political party?
For the public auditor, no, it's nonpartisan.
Okay.
And so, I don't know. I mean, you know, we can think outside the box. Maybe you're a lawyer and you know that the Missouri system, where in the initial appointments of judges in the old days, was done by the chief executive, confirmed by the Congress, and then after a certain number of years, that person comes up for retention election, and nobody runs against them. It's just the people that are asked, should this person be retained?
Oh, I see.
So you know, you could have that as a way of doing it. On Guam, I run. And either opposed or unopposed. Doris ran opposed the first time, but was unopposed for the last 3 times.
But Doris was a senator, right?
She was a senator,
Okay.
and she's a CPA, and but she would still have this position had she not resigned. But the thing is that the same thing with me is that I don't think I would like my judges elected initially, but at least retained get the people to speak out as to whether or not those people should be retained. The way that the Asian Development Bank and the World Development Bank thought, well, then have 2/3 of the Congress be able to remove them. But then that still leaves, the possibility of collusion between the executive and the Congress. So that's why on Guam we decided it was just going to be straight up election. So there is no one that fits all, but the thing is to make sure that the person isn't going to be forced out because they did an audit that is critical of the administration of the legislature. And then you have to, in the Constitution or by law, guarantee a budget or a percentage of the budget to that office to make sure that no Attorney General or no legislature says, I'm going to starve that public auditor's office by not giving it any money. There's got to be an amount. And so, I was able to use my own chits that people owed me to go back and say, I need your help but other people don't have that kind of capital to.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of our brief discussion, Mr. Cruz, and then we have our next guest coming. So, as you know, Guam is the Palauans in Guam are over 3,000. They're the largest group of Palauans outside of Palau. Those in Palau are about 12,000, and we have about 7,000 foreigners, so about 20,000. So, when you were a judge, you said your staff was a Palauan lady who passed away. Did you face like the Palauans come in front of you or either criminal or civil case?
Yes, of course. There were, but it wasn't that much. We now have a major problem with more of the FAS states than we do, and talk about audits. Besides doing audits that we think about of numbers and money, one of the things that we're talking about at PASI is the need to do SDG audits of Sustainable Development Goals to see how we're doing as nations. You guys are doing beautifully down here. Your conservation down here is emulated by everybody else, or everybody wants to have that kind, but of sustainable development. We want to do SDGs, but you have to figure out a way of training for them. So I'm going to be sending staff down to Australia because Australia have been doing SDG audits. And then the other thing that's starting to be a big thing is what is called equal futures audits. I wanted to do an audit up on Guam. How are the police dealing with our FAS citizens or our migrants from even Palau? And what's the difference?
How many FAS citizens there? I know Chugis are like 15,000.
Yeah.
And then
it's huge.
They're more than the Palauans.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing is that not so much their migration, but when I was in the legislature, I kept telling the police department and the Attorney General's office, you're only one arrest away from being a consent decree by the U.S. Justice Department because you don't have police officers or people in the police department that represent the wider diverse community of having Palauan police officers and having FAS citizen on the police force. And so in the legislature, I even said, well, they said, well, you needed citizenship, so I passed a bill that said for police officers to carry a gun, citizenship was not going to be required, because I wanted to have Palauans and FAS citizens who can keep their citizenships from their islands but serve on the police force, because
So
but we want to do those kinds of things, but there just aren't enough people. And even with the amount of money that I'm going to be getting with in the budget that I managed to work out for us, it's still a matter of training. And then there's just so much to be done.
Okay, so let's move to some exciting, past in our lives. So let's go back to over 4 years ago. When you were involved in the fight for land rights in Guam and for self-determination, while we were fighting for independence. And we had conference in the Pacific, we have in Guam, Ponapen, all that. So moving forward up to now, looking back, whatever happened, you still have not have self-determination.
Unfortunately.
Some of your lands have returned.
Some.
Yeah. So the military still occupy a lot of portion of Guam, right?
30%.
Yeah. We moved for independence now. And then after 20 or 30 years of independence, even some of us are questioning whether we as a small country in the Pacific can really survive in this day and age in terms of we have ADB giving us loans, we have U.S. government giving us grant, and then we reach a point where then we have the Chinese coming in and offering us this, okay, if you move your relationship from Taiwan to us, we'll give you $200 million for your budget. And then so we end up here. So we're struggling, and then we're part of the world now with communication and all that. So it's one of those things that we kind of, was this worth it? Because if we have, like right now, we have a big cases of drugs. We simply cannot handle it anymore. We have prisoner died 2 weeks ago. We have a Chinese criminal, head of crime in China he came here 4 years ago before COVID, and then some politicians hired him, a partner or something. And then we just got a word from Interpol and from Chinese government that this guy they're looking for him for violation of 5 major criminal cases in China. We simply cannot handle it. He disappeared last week. And so in law enforcement, of course in finance, it's something that while, as we and many others, we went to United Nations, we met with U.S. Congress, and we asked the Chinese and Russians to allow us to be independent from the trusteeship. But these are the kind of things that we are even questioning now, of our inability to handle these problems that we didn't have before when we were still under the United States.
No, there are geopolitical concerns, and I know some of the young activists on Guam are like, BJ, what happened to you? You seem muted. You're not saying as much. And I'm like, I'm old. I've passed the banner to you guys. You guys carry it. But the thing is that in our day, the United States was trying to get rid of us. There was the secret papers in 1980 that nobody knew about, but had I known about it, I would have pushed it. But the United States is not going to give up Guam. I mean, Guam is the tip of the spear, and I've just, in my old age, have come to accept it. That it's the tip of the spear, and it's not going to. Yesterday, I read an article out of Forbes where Forbes was concerned about the fact that the Navy currently is unable to protect their aircraft carriers. And so they were saying they have the older aircraft carriers go into the Straits of Taiwan, and because they figure they're just indispensable. And I'm like, oh my God, how can you say that 4,000 men and women on a ship are dispensable? You know, and I was sharing the article with some of my friends, and then I realized, wait a minute, Guam is the biggest aircraft carrier in the Pacific. It may be stationary, but it's the biggest aircraft carrier in the Pacific. And the Forbes article was talking about the fact that there aren't enough medical ships or to take us off island. If there was going to be tension and war in the Pacific, Guam's number one place that was going to be attacked. And, like in World War II, I'm always joking that I'm always watching to see whether or not the military kids are missing. Because as soon as they start flying them off, I know that there's going to be trouble. But the thing is that you can't move 160 people, off this USS Guam.
Well,
to the States.
The Irene Olkeriil is my co-host, and I always say that I have one, rose here with one thorn here, So, with no time now to close, if you just give one short question or anything you want to ask this guy before we.
I just want to welcome you to Palau, and I'm really grateful to meet you. I hear him saying Cruz. Are you Judge Cruz? Or
Yes.
How would you like to be addressed? So I'll remember.
BJ.
BJ Cruz. Okay.
Just BJ.
Yeah.
Even when I was a judge, the other judges would get mad. But that's what the name that I was given, and it's just easier. I'm not fixed on titles.
Yeah.
There's just one incident. We were still radicals in the 70s, and then we organized a conference, Self-Determination Independence Conference in Guam, with these guys, radicals. So we organized it in the legislature, and we had this military brass, and on the top, government officials, U.S. and local. And then we invite this guy from, I think from Tahiti, radical as hell. I mean, this guy just. And then, so he came in, and then he went to the podium. He spoke. I mean, he blasted U.S. and everybody, because these guys were against French. So, I mean, it's, so we were sitting there. I said, Jesus, are we going to be in jail after this? Yeah, so it was interesting those days. So, BJ, I know you're going to play around today, right? In the afternoon, you probably have some.
Are you here for the conference?
Yes.
The
The
okay.
PASI conference.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, we're meeting at 9 to 12 to finalize.
Yes.
so you're going to release to the public
Well, there'll be a
statement
communique.
or
There'll be a
communique?
public communique
Okay.
that comes out of it. Like in the old days that we used to always issue communiques from our.
Yeah.
Well, I've listened a lot and learned a lot, and I like to know that people like you and Moses are still here. As much as many would not admit, both Guam, Palau would be very stagnant and dead if they didn't have people like you and Moses.
Well, we plowed it, and it's
Make a
now up to you
difference.
guys to push it forward, because we're barely able to walk up the stairs.
Yes, he's
So
trying
now
to
you're-
pass on the torch.
Thank you very much.
My
Thank
friends,
you very
nice
much
to see
again.
you.
Thank you very much for having me here.
And enjoy your stay
Please
in
support your
Palau.
local office of the public auditor.
Okay.
I will certainly
Janice,
do, and we'll pass
3
on the
minutes
word.
break, and then we'll have the next one. Thank you very much.